Recently, I restored the tuner, which was the third piece in my uncle's 1977 Hitachi system, and gave you some history on Hitachi and the tuner. However, when I repaired the amp on this channel, it was only my second episode, and I left a lot of information out that I normally put in my videos, and I also did a little more research. There's still not much information available online for the Hitachi HA330 amplifier. However, I was able to dig up a 3-page article written just for this amp in the July 1978 German audio magazine. The article starts by asking, what does the longest escalator in America and the fastest passenger elevator in Japan have in common with this little HA330 hi-fi amplifier? And the answer is the title of this article, Solid Stuff. The article goes on to state that the unit has good price-performance ratio, has a neat metal front panel with precise controls, and that a divider protects the sensitive preamplifier from the magnetic interference of the power amplifier. It's also noted that the interior has short cable routes thanks to clever construction. They claimed that compared to approximately 200 more expensive amplifiers they had previously tested, the Hitachi had yielded decent results, and for 570 marks they recommended it as the Hitachi HA330 could provide a solid entry level into high fidelity. As for the price of 570 marks, I found it listed in 1979 for the 1980s Buyer's Catalog of Audio Scene Canada magazine. Now mind you, this was 2 years after its release, but it was still retailing for 330 Canadian at the time, which was 230 US, and representing 961 US, 1,305 Canadian, and 897 euros in today's economy. I also found a German Hitachi marketing brochure that said that it encompassed a modern OCL circuit concept for improved playback, particularly in the bass range, and that the hi-fi amplifier's 2x 50-watt music outputs were the key values that make this model the powerful heart of a valuable system. The unit adheres to the DIN 45500 standard that allows the tape copy option to transfer tapes at a proper volume control with 2 level indicators with a precise watt scale separate for each speaker. Now, if you're not familiar with the term, OCL stands for Output Capacitorless Amplifier Design. It doesn't mean the unit has no capacitors, it just means that there's no output coupling capacitor, and that one of its advantages is that it allows the unit to deliver high power outputs at low audio frequencies. OCL amplifiers waste a lot more power because of their design, but the results speak for themselves as you hear much louder and clearer sounds emanating from the speakers. Today, amplifiers such as these are quite expensive and fetch several thousands of dollars. According to the service manual, it also boasts having a few features like protective circuitry for safety that limits the current going to the transistors to protect them from overcurrent, a low filter that reduces hum and rumble in the ultra-low frequencies without impairing the sound quality, and accommodation for 2 sets of tape deck inputs and outputs and speaker outputs, so you can plug in 4 speakers, the A's and the B's. So while it might not have been a very popular unit back in the day, or have the glory that some other old components have today, I believe the Hitachi HA330 was one of those little gems meant to be found and appreciated by a few who were lucky enough to own one. I inherited this amp from my uncle, and it's of sentimental value to me, so I want to make sure I completely restore it and give it a new life. Hello everyone and welcome. I'm the Retro Opera Guy. Boy, is it ever hot out there. It's 33 degrees today and plus humidity. I don't know how, but it's only, end of May, and my God, is it ever hot. But anyways, that being said, welcome and thank you to all the existing and new subscribers. I really appreciate it, and this channel has been growing great. I really am happy. I'm getting hundreds of new subscribers a month, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Now, for those of you who follow also, you know that I'm tying the knot on Sunday. After over a decade of being with Mrs. RRG, it's things that you put aside, and finally we decided to tie the knot. So we're doing it on Sunday, only 3 days left until either she makes an honest man out of me or I make an honest woman out of her. But with that, of course, there was some delays. So I do apologize again. And I know you guys wanted some new content, but the thing is that I had already worked on this episode because also the ones who've been following, you know that I'm fixing my uncle's system from 1977. So it's a Hitachi system. It has the tape deck, the amplifier, and the turntable. Now the thing is that when I fixed the amp, it was only my second episode on the channel, and I wasn't sure exactly what direction I was going with the show and with everything. And you know, my format is established now pretty much of how I do things, right? You know, except for when I rant and stuff. But for the restorations, I think you guys are used to it. You know my format, and this is what I do. So I went back to it and I edited a couple of older episodes, and one of them was this. Not only re-edited, but I did some research to find more information on this sound, because I thought there's no way there can't be anything on it. So I did find something. I presented you the history in the beginning. I fixed a couple of mistakes, and I of course re-edited the whole thing, did some new narration, but it is an older and a little bit thinner me in the video that you do see. But anyways, the rest of the information is all there, and I really hope you appreciate it. And I do have some new content coming your way, so don't forget, of course, to you know, subscribe and hit the notification, because I will be dropping next week some new content. I have it right behind the camera as we speak right now. Something beautiful in the 1980s that I'm not telling you what it is, but the parts came in yesterday. I'm finishing that up. And then I've got something to my left here, which is actually standing. It's about this high. I'm not telling you either what it is. And that's in Q. But I've got the home theater episode. I point because my home theater is that way. A home theater episode that I'm completed, almost completed. And, you know, I'm putting together as well on the computer. So that's coming your way. So don't forget to hit the notification and subscribe. And of course, you want to support the channel. Please, you know, it's completely free by just at least subscribing, you know, and putting the thumbs up if you like the content and stuff. So again, I really do appreciate it. I want to thank you to those who do support the channel as well. So anyways, without further ado, let's go look at this beautiful amp from 1977. This video is sponsored by PCBWay. They make great quality PCBs from your Gerber files starting at only $5. All standard PCBs have now been upgraded for free from TG130-140 heat resistance to TG150. If you're in need of getting your own PCBs manufactured at reasonable prices for production runs or simply a one-off PCB, they offer excellent quality and unsurpassed service to help you with your designs and free online quotes. And with their quick order feature, your parameters are automatically set from your Gerber files. With fast turnaround times and fast delivery, I definitely recommend checking them out. The link is in the description below. I begin with a visual inspection of the board to look for any burnt caps or other components. At the same time, I'm taking note of any capacitor values I might not have in stock. I then started replacing all the capacitors on the smaller board since I had these values on hand before moving on to the main board. I tested a random 47 microfarad capacitor that was testing at nearly 60 with 5 ohms of resistance. I'm replacing the capacitor with high-quality Japanese-made Nishikon audio capacitors, and because the unit is over 45 years old, the capacitors are much smaller in size while being rated for higher temperatures of 105 degrees. I decided to test a few more random capacitors, only to find that they had all exceeded their expected lifespan, as not one tested near its expected value and all showed signs of high resistance. I also went over all the suspected cold or cracked solder joints on the board and then cleaned it with 99% alcohol and soft toothbrush. Here's a look at the top board with all new capacitors, the soldering redone and cleaned up. The next order of business were the two large capacitors on the board. Since there's no dual power supply in this unit, they are used to split the power supply. There's one for the negative and one for the positive voltage. While some of these large caps may have 2 or 3 values, these are single capacitors as you can see from the printing on it. Legs A, B, and D are blank, and leg C is 10,000 microfarad. The extra leg with a black dot represents the negative side of the capacitor. Still, it's not something I keep on hand, and I will have to order them. So while I wait for them to come in, let's go take a bath. Now it's very important, I want to mention something about these capacitors. If ever you pull one out of a unit and you see there are multiple legs coming out, it's very important that you read the side. Some of these will have 2 or 3 capacitors inside of one, all right? And it will say the values on the side. In this case, if you look, and I will give you a close-up of this in a minute, A blank, B blank, C 50 volts, 10,000 microfarads, and D blank, all right? So in this case, there really is only one, and only 2 of these are being used. The rest is being used for support. So just a word of caution when you're looking at these and when you're ordering them. So this can effectively be replaced with a only 2-leg capacitor of the same value, of course. So the big capacitors are in. It looks like they'll fit, but of course the legs don't line up, as you can see here in the picture. So I'll have to be creative and figure it out. So here's what I figured out. I'm going to be using these 2 holes. The hole in the middle doesn't go anywhere, so I'll have to jump it. I'm also going to glue down the capacitors since they don't have as much support anymore. So that's why I'm drawing a pencil mark around and I'm going to be applying some glue. I applied just a bit of glue to the board and to the capacitor, and of course making sure before I put it in that it's in the right direction. You don't want to put too much glue because you want to make sure that you're able to take it out in the future. Now on the underside, I fold the legs properly against the board and then I solder them in place. For the other holes that had extra leg for support, I just filled them with solder. I then install a jumper between the middle hole that I used that had no contact pad to the contact pad that it should connect to. I then test for continuity to make sure that everything connects up properly. And here's what the jumpers look like when finished. You can see I used the middle to the plus side and the middle to the negative side for the other. Now, even though the new capacitor is shorter, I managed putting the clip back on, the original clip, and it's holding in place. And then of course I went through the whole board to check for bad solder joints. So here's the completed board with the modifications for the capacitors, as well as I redid all the solder joints whenever there was any kind of a button or connector or switch there. And I of course replaced it with all Nichicon capacitors, audio capacitors. There was one more board to clean up, so I redid all the soldering on that little board, tightened it up as well because it had gotten loose over the years. And then I redid all the soldering on the RCA connectors in the back. And last but not least, I used some contact cleaner for all the switches and knobs. And it's time to reassemble the unit. I also want to offer a word of advice for anybody working with these capacitors. They hold quite a charge, all right? So if you have an old unit lying around and then you go and plug it in, test it, and then you unplug and start working on it, it might not be enough, okay? So it's better if you can leave it unplugged for quite a few hours or even a day before you start working on it. Make sure that these are completely discharged because you can get quite a shock from something like that, all right? So please be careful. Fairly big job, 26 capacitors, 2 of the large ones, 24 of the small ones. Cost wasn't too much of an issue. These big ones were about $11 each, and the little ones were the average 75 cents to $1.25 each. I replaced it all with high-grade audio capacitors. I'm not going to get into all of that right now. I'll probably make a show one day just on capacitors. But I do want to mention something. Again, these were 44 years old. And you have to understand something. If you're going to plug it in and test it, you're always going to get false readings. I mean, these are 44 years old, and there's a lot of white papers from manufacturers out there that state that capacitors have about a 15-year lifespan. Now, these were 44 years old. They will give you false readings. They will not perform correctly. And I'll put it up on the screen, by the way. I tested quite a few of these, and it was failure after failure and after failure. They had resistance, they had high ESR on them, and stuff like that. So I just want to mention that. And of course, I did a lot of other work on the amp. So let's take a look at the finished product.